Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
And welcome to it. It is My Nerd World, Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you once again for checking out the show, dedicated to the greatest band on the face of the planet, at least as far as you and I are concerned. We have a lot to talk about on this week's show. It's a time of celebration. We've got set list changes for the final leg of the tour, the debut of the Before We Drown, not only song live, but also the video as well. I've got a lot of fantastic listener feedback to dive into this week as well. First off, though, and unfortunately, we have to start off with a bit of sad news relating to Depeche Mode's extended family, as earlier this week, Brian Griffin, the iconic Depeche Mode photographer, passed away at the age of 75. It's been a lot of fun watching friends of the show, Depeche Mode fans, take in the concerts over the course of the past week, especially with the set list changes. I was watching a video of Rob Rome from the Global Fan Group. I know that he and many of you have had the opportunity to spend some time as of late with Brian Griffin as he's been out promoting his book. So it came as quite a surprise to many that Brian Griffin passed away in the middle of such a important time, not only in the band's career during this memento mori area, but clearly for him as well. He'd always been very open at sharing his time with Depeche Mode and his experiences with the band, whether it's in public, whether it's through his own works and book, or whether it's during the interviews that we've had a chance to watch throughout the years attached to the albums that he was a part of, specifically Depeche Mode's first 5 albums. I'll share with you an article that I pulled from Sideline relating to the passing of Brian Griffin. UK mourns the loss of Brian Griffin, a trailblazing British photographer who passed away peacefully in his sleep on January 29th at the age of 75. Born on April 13th of 1948, Griffin carved out a niche in photography, and his distinctive portrayals of 1980s pop musicians earning him the title of Photographer of the Decade from The Guardian back in 1989. His influential work now graces the permanent collections of esteemed institutions like the Arts Council, British Council, Victoria and Albert Museum, the National Portrait Gallery in London as well. Griffin's lens captured iconic images of music legends from Susie Sue, Kate Bush, Depeche Mode, Ultravox, R.E.M., Billy Idol, Iggy Pop, Ringo Starr, Queen, and Peter Gabriel. His collaboration with Depeche Mode notably shaped their visual identity in the early 1980s. He created compelling record covers that captivated audiences even before they listened to the music. One of his most celebrated works is the cover for Depeche Mode's A Broken Frame, which at the decisive moment captured with precision. This iconic photo was later acclaimed as the best photo of the 1980s by Life magazine. Griffin also ventured into video production, directing the mystical music video for Depeche Mode's Only When I Lose Myself. His artistic contributions were recently compiled in the Depeche Mode book Mode. And again, he was a part of the artwork of Depeche Mode's first 5 albums. And Sideline's piece wraps up with, our readers will particularly remember Griffin for his significant impact on Depeche Mode's image and style. Listen, his work, Brian Griffin's work on Depeche Mode in those early years, for those of us that found Depeche Mode during that time period, I mean, he was the visual gateway to this band that would fundamentally change the lives of so many of us. And it was a really interesting and unique artistic vision that he had for Depeche that, in my opinion, set us fans up well for the transition into Anton Corbijn's work. It was both artistic, ambiguous, and also accessible. It made sense for us as fans. going and finding the various singles and imports and seeing the different images that Brian did for those first 5 albums and the alternate versions of what the covers could have been for, like, say, Construction Time again. They were challenging. They were challenging to me as a very young teenager, listening to this music that I'd never heard before that would shape my taste in music and my life from then on. And Brian Griffin, for those first 5 albums, was that visual gateway for so many of us. And when Anton Corbijn comes along and shifts the visual focus of Depeche Mode in his own distinct style, I think that there's a level that Brian Griffin contributed to his contributions to the band. It gave us as fans the opportunity to more easily transition to that artistic work. It really kind of taught me about art, is a very simple way of saying it, something that I never imagined that I would be into, and I never really got much into doing that thing with my fingers, air quotes, art, except for the fact when it comes to Depeche Mode. And it was, all at once challenging, unique, special, exciting, because it was a part of this band that created this music that we all ended up falling in love with. And I think it's awesome that Brian was able to get his book out before his passing, and that he was able to connect with so many fans, even all of these decades later after his time with Depeche Mode. And I imagine that he was able to experience, at least somewhat, I mean, I would pray that was the case, that the love that fans have for him and what he did for those of us that found Depeche Mode during that period of time when he was guiding the visual aspect of the band. So it's sad. We're all getting older, and Brian Griffin, thanks to him for contributing to this band that we love so much, and may he rest in peace. Boy, it's just tough to hear. It's tough to it's just tough. It's just tough. All right, let's shift gears here. I've got a lot to talk about with the set list changes that have taken place over the course of the past week in the 4th leg of the tour, the debut of the Before We Drown video. I'm going to reserve a lot of my commentary that I would typically put here in the listener feedback portion, in the content portion of the podcast, and I'm going to add my commentary to the listener feedback this week is what I'm trying to say. I got a lot, I heard from a lot of you this week, and there was a lot on your minds, and I really want to go through as much as I possibly can from you that have written over the course of the past week. I'll share my quick thoughts on the Before We Drown video. It's fine, which is kind of my thoughts for almost all of the videos attached to Memento Mori. Ghosts, again, is my favorite. I love the song. It's one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs. It's rising up to the top 10 of my all-time favorite Depeche Mode songs. I also love that video. I think it's one of Anton Corbijn's best videos. The video for Wagging Tongue is okay. There's a bit of a story to it, so I appreciate it for that. My favorite Stranger, less so. And Before We Drown, kind of less so. I think the visuals from what I've seen of the concert footage from the past week online, I think the visuals of the black and white ocean, Anton Corbijn style, lend itself well for the song live, and definitely captures the mood of the song in a live environment. I can only imagine what it must be like to be there in the audience. The video itself, I just kind of thought was there. Didn't really do much for me. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I don't know that I will be going back and doing many repeat viewings of the video like I have for Ghosts again. I think I've watched Wagging Tongue a few times and My Favorite Stranger only once. I did appreciate in the video, if you pay close attention it really is just the ocean scene, the music, and then a man in a trench coat walking out into the water and eventually lying down as if he's drowning. I'm really just, that's what it is. I did appreciate the timing of some of the imagery coinciding with the beats of the song. I thought that was that was well done and enjoyable. I did feel like it fit the song well, but just in terms of something exciting and fresh and new, it just didn't do a whole lot for me. And I don't know, it's hard because, you go back to, say, Strange, and we're really not all that far removed in terms of the quality of video, of imagery that we're getting from Anton Corbijn that we got going all the way back to the black and white that we got on Strange, and then in the color version of Strange 2. It seems as if Anton's work is a little less dynamic than it has been in years past for various reasons. And there's a part of me that thinks there's more opportunity with these songs to do something a little bit more visually creative. But I also understand, too, that we're in a much different time in terms of the role that videos play. And we don't have outlets anymore where people go and channels anymore where people go and watch specifically to watch music videos over and over again and that serve as gateways to songs. I mean, that used to be what it was when MTV started. The music video was a gateway to find new music, and that's changed quite a bit. So, it's there, it's fine, doesn't do just a whole heck of a lot for me. I know for some of you it did, and I'm really glad to hear that, and we'll get to that with listener feedback this week. And speaking of listener feedback, before I dive in any further, friend of the show, friend of mine, Matt from Denver, right as I was recording, had texted wondering if the podcast was coming today, and I paused it to let him know that I was in the middle of recording, and he's left this message. He says, Matt from Denver says, hello to all the friends of the show. Depeche Mode rules, and Jon Justice is the man, ! That is all. Matt, you are too kind. All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week. There's a lot of it. All right, first, we'll hear from Amy in Worcestershire, who writes this. Hey, John, what a busy week for Depeche Mode news. Setlist changes, a new video, and I heard this morning that Brian Griffin had sadly passed away. Corbijn may be the architect behind modern mode, but Brian still gave us some fantastic album covers. Given the excitement over the setlist changes in London and probably in Manchester and Glasgow by the time the next podcast goes out, waxing lyrical over Birmingham feels a bit of an anticlimax. Now. Jason's excellent review last week nailed it, so I won't be offended if you don't have time or inclination to read this. Oh, but I do. I had a standing ticket, first time doing general admission, and I was parallel with the end of the catwalk in front of Martin, so not a million miles away from Jason. And I had some great views, especially during the encore. Seeing Dave and Martin bowing and then hugging each other warmly at the end of Waiting for the Night was a really special moment. My biggest takeaway as a first-timer was exactly that. The immense feeling of warmth and connection through almost every aspect of the gig. People of all ages, backgrounds, and nationalities chatting in the queue, the bond between Dave and Martin on stage, the singing and dancing down on the floor. Well, apart from a couple of almost fights and the deadpan guy along from me who only seemed to wake up during Never Let Me Down Again. And the interaction and mutual respect between the band and the audience. I could have done with another few pairs of eyes to take it all in. Some of the other little moments and details with me are the power and vibration of my cosmos' mind. For a split second, I thought I'd made a fatal error being so close to the speakers. Fortunately, unfounded. The little glances and looks between Martin and Peter, and then over at Dave when he missed the start of Black Celebration, a mixture of what the bleep's going on and come on, Dave, get on with it. Just how uplifting Ghosts Again sounded live. Dave being on full-on Essex Boy after singing Happy Birthday, Sweetheart. Dave's bum wiggling at the end of Precious. I often wonder how Martin feels about performing Precious now given its original inspiration, so it just seemed slightly comical seeing Dave's moves during the song about divorce. Then again, I think a lot about the enduring appeal of DM is Martin's ability to find light in the dark through his lyrics, and we all could do with a bit of that in today's world. Maybe that's just me, though. And Dave often talks about how songs take on different meanings throughout the course of their career. So you wonder, if Precious in Dave's mind has, a different, there's an attachment to it that's much different than the rationale as to why Martin wrote it in the first place. Finally, Martin sneaking a throat sweet here and there and dropping one off at the end of the catwalk before waiting for the night. If he had a sore throat, you certainly couldn't tell. It's going to sound really cliche and verging on the edge of cringe, sorry friends of the show, but Never Let Me Down Again was the highlight for me. I love the shot of Dave silhouetted against the sea of waving arms in 101, so the feeling of seeing the whole arena joining in with the music and belonging to the masses myself this time was simply incredible. See, it's that sense of connection thing again. I'll 100% admit to feeling a tad sulky about the 3 tour debuts that London got on Saturday, like Somebody over Heaven every time. I'd take Somebody over Heaven every time. But I guess it doesn't matter. The worst kind of diseased mind is the one filled with jealousy, right? Nice. Oh well, wouldn't it be amazing if some of these later setlist changes end up being recorded and making their way into the final Memento Mori live release, along with the bonus tracks? If not, we'll always have YouTube. Hope you have a great week. Amy in Worcestershire, but might have just booked a last-minute trip to Berlin to do it all again. I guess we'll have to wait. Thank you, as always, Amy. James writes in, have seen the boys in Twickenham, Orlando, and tonight in Glasgow. What a wonderful set list tonight. So many old favorites, almost could not believe how many from the 101 days. Also, Before We Drown was on there, and it didn't sound like they have just started playing this. The tour's live album would have been great if it had this set list. Maybe it still will. Many thanks for giving us all somewhere to share our thoughts on these guys, James. Yeah, I was, honestly, I watched the footage and a couple of different clips from Before We Drown, and it sounded amazing. I was really interested in how the closing moments of the song, where everything kind of comes together, you have the chants from Martin, it kind of falls into echo. I mean, it really just soars in that moment, and I wasn't sure how that was going to translate live, and they did it spectacularly. I was jealous that we did not get a chance to see it live when I saw the show in Denver. Stephanie writes in, thanks as always for your podcast. Thank you, Stephanie. It's always a highlight of my week when commuting to work. I've just watched the Before We Drown video, and I'm loving it. As you know, I live on the Baltic coast, and I love the sea at any time of the year. It's a bit of a shame not to see Dave and Martin, but who am I to criticize the great Anton Corbijn? Hopefully it's his video too. Yes, I believe it is. I couldn't find any info, unfortunately. I love the pictures. Very well done video. That's it for me. I hope you're doing well. I am, and thank you. C198 writes, thank you, John. I'm trying as best as I can to exclude wishful thinking in the following lines. I'm still not sure that this tour's live recording will be the Mexico City show. Yeah, I'm not either at this point in time. We know they filmed something in Mexico. We know there was a movie, something being filmed in Mexico by a Mexican film director. So whatever that is remains to be seen. I'm still inclined to believe it's what we'll get come either April or May, based off the rumors that I've heard. The set list changes Before We Drown, Behind the Wheel are so great. I really hope that Anton will still record a show for us, a show for this tour's live recording. Again, this might be wishful thinking, but all we do know for certain is that the filming in Mexico was taking place for an untitled Depeche Mode documentary, not a concert film live album recording. Again, I hope that Before We Drown will be recorded. My God, this song is my highlight from Memento Mori, and it sounds great live. It just has to be recorded for the official live recording. You know, again, kind of putting it on my list of questions for the band where I ever, if I were ever blessed to be able to interview them. The decision to remove World in My Eyes and the Fletch tribute to replace it with Behind the Wheel, I thought was an odd one. I was actually texting with Matt about this, and we were kind of both, that's an odd one. Because you could have switched out Black Celebration, but they must, they must enjoy doing that live. Now, that portion of the show, considering they were switching out World in My Eyes, did have a visual component. For Behind the Wheel, they included the black and white Anton Corbijn footage from the original video. And I would like to know sort of the thought process behind that, whether or not Anton had a conversation with the band or Anton just decided to do that himself. I know we have the videos for My Favorite Stranger, for the song. Same thing with Ghost Again as well. But the inclusion of that old video with it, I just thought was a interesting choice for the tour. And I would be curious to know, again, removing the Fletch tribute and replacing it with that song, even though Dave has still been doing a shout-out to Fletch during that song. And I suppose there's probably an argument that Fletch was also a big fan of Behind the Wheel as well. But it was an interesting and surprising move, to say the least. Let's see. Next we go here in Andrea. My bad. Andrea writes, the Monday show at O2 London was fantastic. I'm happy with the set list, but now crying because Before We Drown was on Saturday's show. I can't stop listening to Memento Mori. Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, you're so close to seeing that one song. And I wonder how closely the band follows any of the fan portion of it. If they have any idea the level of discussion that goes into every show and potential expectations of what songs they're going to do. Or if that is just completely, if they're completely separated from all that. I'd be very interested. All right, Dave Fulton's got a lot to say, so I'm going to share it with you. First, he writes in, I read the same review. This is the one that I read last week. And was instantly bored. Same old tired cliches I've been reading, from positive reviewers for 35 plus years. I don't know who these reviews are even for, really. It's not a consumer advisory. It's a pure content space filling. Maybe someone wants to be confirmed in their biases, and it's nice to read the snark. I suspect a fan review might make me wince a little as well, but at least there's some heart and intensity in the prose. It would be nice to see an article that discusses a Depeche Mode show in the context of the world that we live in now. D.A. Pennebaker sort of did this with his commentary in a way, following a bunch of too cool American kids who want to get lost in their sunglasses. But then at the concert itself, it is like they have entered the sacred space. And maybe we who live in this often cold, often unfeeling, homogenized world need Depeche Mode in our lives to provide grounding in an authentic feeling. Nicely said. Memento Mori has not rekindled my enthusiasm as a Depeche Mode fan by revealing itself to be a masterpiece. Has not only rekindled my enthusiasm as a Depeche Mode fan by revealing itself to be a masterpiece, it has caused me to pause and reflect on how I meet new music from the band. Casting my mind back to 1986, when having absorbed the singles and People Are People compilations, I consider myself a newly minted fan and waited with great anticipation for the arrival of Black Celebration, an album that would be my first new Depeche Mode album. When Stripped first dropped that winter, I didn't know what to make of it, and the listening process that followed. These 7 stages of catching up are what has transpired with every subsequent release from the band. Number 1, anticipation. Hearing the new music is forthcoming. Time to revisit the old favorites. 2, expectation. Wondering what the new music will sound like and assuming it will sound like Depeche, but different. Confusing. Number 3, first listening. Unsure what I'm hearing. Is this even Depeche Mode? Is this U2 messing around again? 4, disappointment. Ugh, it's not. Fill in the blank of the last signature tunes I had in mind. Probably wrong. 5, recognition. Repeat listening reveals warm familiarity. 6, joy and acceptance. These songs give me the feels. The music works in the present context, giving me hope for progress and innovation while securing itself within the catalog. 7, cataloging and memorializing. The new songs join the conversation and fall in and out of my eternally revised top 5, top 10, and top 20. The truth of the matter is there are rare exceptions. Barrel of a Gun, Wrong, Ghosts Again. I am almost never in love with the first songs I hear. There seems to be some kind of period of awkward flirtation that precedes the pleasure. Sometimes, as is the case of Delta Machine, it can be years before I can appreciate the work. I'm still struggling with Spirit, to be honest. I don't think I'm alone on that, although I do adore Cover Me, and I think it may be Dave's masterpiece. But then there's Broken. I have to think on that. Yeah, I'll take Broken over Cover Me, but Cover Me is right there. And Spirit has come around on me. I will always remember arriving in Denver, getting off my flight, and the playlist landing on Spirit and listening to Spirit as I was working my way through the airport, heading over to get the rental car, getting in the rental car, and then driving down to where my hotel was. And it really just cemented that Depeche Mode week for me and brought a new appreciation for that album that I hadn't had up until that point. Even the songs that I didn't care for previously. Kind regards from KROQ Country, David. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. All right. And there's one more here from David as well. He wrote in just recently in the wake of the passing of Brian Griffin. I'd recently been saving my pennies to purchase a print of his photographic work with Depeche after Von George had announced his business partnership with him last year. Brian seemed set for a wave of new recognition during this interval of interest in the band. For fans who came to Depeche Mode in the mid-1980s, Brian Griffin was the visual aspect of the band. Every image was iconic, and I'm at a loss to isolate one photograph from that period for special recognition. Surely the album sleeve for A Broken Frame will live on for an eternity, and perhaps will continue to inspire folks to revisit the music on the oft-overlooked record. But for me, the factory wedding of Some Great Reward haunts my memory for its ironic juxtaposition of romance and industry. Of course, even this imagery is in an active competition with the Soviet kitsch of Construction Time again, where you really believe that a man could bring a mountain to the ground with a single sledgehammer. All fans rightly adore and respect the talents of Anton Corbijn for his work with the band. Clearly, that has truly been a collaborative, creative relationship. But the visual story of Depeche Mode begins with the heartbreaking imagery of Brian Griffin. How fortunate that the band has been to work with two visual geniuses during their career. And very nicely said there, David. And, one last point on Brian Griffin, at least unless there's more in the listener feedback I have coming up. And that is Only When I Lose Myself video. It's a video I actually quite enjoy. It fits well within the catalog of Depeche Mode videos, while still being unique in and of itself. There's imagery in that video that I have often wanted when I've watched the video and go, man, I wish I had just a still that I could frame. Particularly the shot where it's draped in blue, there's a woman standing in the roadway, and there's the car that's flipping in the air. That shot is just absolutely stunning to me. In terms of art, again, to use David's word, the juxtaposition there of the woman standing in the road with a car, but the car is in a position in the air that you typically wouldn't see, and the woman shouldn't be standing in the roadway. So that video is unique, and I think it's a special one. Again, within the legacy of the videos of the band. Next, we go to friend of the show, Matt, who you heard from earlier in the podcast, as he was wondering when it would be popping up. So I was shared, and I believe it was actually David, had shared with me and reminded me of the Love in Itself Lounge version, which I hadn't heard, I think, since probably when I first got the single that it was actually on. And I reminded Matt of this, and this sent him down memory's lane, and I wanted to share with you what he wrote to me. He said, I too had not listened to the lounge mix of Love in Itself since high school. What a time capsule it was to listen to that mix. Took me right back to those days. Listening to the track for the first time in over 30 years, a few things dawned on me. Fletch is nowhere to be found in that recording. Now, he neither sings nor plays any instruments, especially not acoustic instruments. At the time, I didn't really know that. Until I saw 101, I had no idea that Fletch was really just the greatest hand clapper of all time. 2, listening to the lounge version, I'm reminded of how incredible this band really is. Amazing musicians, songwriters, and singers. I assume this recording is live, and even though it's just a 3-piece, they sound incredible. And to think, they were absolute babies at that time, so young. Plus, Alan had only recently joined the band, and how amazing they all sounded together. But what really struck me was, compare this version to the album version, or any album track of DM, really. It really underscores how DM approached making and recording music versus the rest of the music world. No wonder I fell so hard for DM. Their sound is so unique. It was so different from anything else on the radio or MTV, and it spoke to me instantly. It's easy to take their sound for granted, as they've been doing this for over 40 years. But when you really listen to how they made and recorded the music, the sampling of the random noises, and the processing of traditional instrument sounds to create a soundscape that is completely their own, it's just incredible. They are so deserving of their Rock Hall status. I know Kraftwerk pioneered some of that sound, but DM took it to an entirely new level, so refined, layered, and precise, yet never losing the emotional element that makes them so special. I was never really a Kraftwerk fan. Really, unlike DM, no emotional connection to their music. Listen to Shake the Disease or Stripped, and the blend of precise, processed sounds and emotion. Only one band in the world makes music like that, and when you hear DM do a novelty take on one of their songs, like this lounge version, it really underscores how special their sound is. Also, Dave's lounge singer doppelganger is on full display on this track and was a harbinger for things to come. Fast forward 20 years when Dave begins to embrace the sleazy Elvis lounge singer persona on stage of their later tours. Not my fave Dave, but fun to see in its infancy. Alan's jazz piano on this version is amazing and quite telling. He's a virtuoso musician, and the other 3 talked about it often. He was classically trained, and I think the other 3 were always a bit intimidated by his musicianship, listening to him riff and solo on the last 30 seconds or so of the lounge version is an eye-opening hindsight. I didn't know it at the time, but clearly he would never be satisfied with the simple formulaic approach required to write and play pop songs, and even anti-pop songs like DM's catalog. In retrospect, the foreshadowing of his departure is all over this track. Alan wasn't ever really into the rock star thing and always longed for something more musically avant-garde and challenging. See Recoil and his other post-DM projects. Crazy to think that a little over 10 years after they recorded this lounge version, Alan would go and leave the band. I'll never get over his departure. I'm such an Alan Wilder stan and really miss him. But listening to the lounge version in 2024 gave me a different perspective on this departure. We were lucky to have Alan in DM for 10 plus years. He was never going to stay in the band. It's just not who Alan is. So let's be thankful we got his contributions for a decade and cherish the music he helped create. I miss you so much, Alan, but I understand why you left, and I'm grateful for the time you gave the band. Thanks for that trip down memory lane. And thank you, Matt, and everybody who's written in this week. And lastly, we hear from Philip Finch from Leeds, UK, talks about his time at the Manchester show on Monday the 29th. He writes, huge fan of the podcast, one of the many wonderful friends of the show around the world. So, the final leg of the tour commences, and I get to see Depeche Mode again at their show in Manchester on Monday the 29th, January 2024. I've been looking forward to this show in any case, but excitement levels had reached stratospheric levels following the news of the notable set changes at the second show of London's O2 Arena in the previous Saturday evening. As I imagine you will talk about it on the podcast this week, the band decided to premiere the live rendition of Before We Drown, timing with the official launch of Anton Corbijn's directed video for this beautiful song this week. Also, the inclusion of Home and Somebody in the Martin Peters section sounded like interesting changes, and with Behind the Wheel also being added to the second London show later in the set, I couldn't have been more excited about the prospect of seeing this live and up close in Manchester, although I did also factor in how in previous shows they would flip the set list night to night, and we might get the classic 2023 playlist on our night. Now, if you look at the set list, it reads like an old-school cassette tape mix you might have created for a friend back in the days when we made those tapes. It's almost exclusively back-to-back showstoppers. Walking in My Shoes, It's No Good, Policy of Truth, In Your Room, Everything Counts, Precious, all absolute epics. And the crowd are going completely wild. For those of us who have braved the elements and queued and waited patiently for 9 hours or more, it is all very much worth it. As Dave and Martin take turns to walk down the catwalk towards us, they then stand just inches from our outstretched arms. It's a joyous sight, slightly unreal feeling being so close to our heroes. Yes, indeed, it is. So blessed to be able to have been in that front row in Denver myself. Let's see. During Everything Counts, Dave walks across to our side of the T and smiles directly at my friend Liz, who is excited she almost explodes. On with the set list and the arrival of Before We Drown. As soon as the giant screen shows the black and white grainy image of crashing waves of the sea, I know my favorite track from Memento Mori is about to play. It works brilliantly as a live track, and so I'm so glad I got to experience it on this leg of the tour. It's the one moment of the show I permit myself to film a portion on my phone as I wanted to enjoy the concert in all its glory, phone-free, which many people in the hall were also doing, it seems, that evening. We then have two beautiful Martin songs, Strange Love, which is actually rather lovely in this setting with lots of audience participation, and then Somebody, which has people in tears. When Ghosts Again lands, you are reminded of just how strong the new material is. It sits up there with It's No Good as an epic standout track. Behind the Wheel replaces World in My Eyes, signaling the band making a move from the Andy Fletcher-themed imagery of the replaced track, but with a beautiful acknowledgement from Dave at the end of the track about his former bandmate and friend. Then into the end of the show, and it's back to the anthems, again, with Stripped and Enjoy the Silence bringing the roof down. Possibly the highlight of the whole evening is the tender and wonderful duet between Dave and Martin on Waiting for the Night to Fall. Performed in the center of the little stage at the end of the T catwalk, just inches away from where we were standing, it amazes me at just how powerful their voices still are at the end of this segment of the show. It is genuinely a hairs on the back of your neck moment. I will allow myself to take a single photo to help me capture the moment. I did the same thing. I took a little snapshots here and there throughout the entire time that I was watching. Well, I shouldn't say throughout the entire time. Throughout the show, at various moments quickly, I took photographs and just a couple of quick videos, much like you and many others just wanting to take in the show like we did when we didn't have the intrusion of tiny computers in our pockets. Show conclusion, and it's time for the unstoppable Never Let Me Down and Personal Jesus. The crowd are completely blown away. A wonderful and magical evening we will never forget. For those fans looking forward to the upcoming shows across Europe, you're in for an absolutely amazing treat. Enjoy. Thanks again for the podcast. Here's hoping for more Depeche Mode tours in the future, Philip. Thank you, Philip. And thank you to everybody who wrote in this week. Just what a fantastic slate of listener feedback in the wake of sort of a bittersweet week, right? Fantastic week to be a Depeche Mode fan with the debut of the Before We Drown video, set list changes, but also saddened with the loss of Brian Griffin, and nice to be able to celebrate what he was able to give to so many of us during our infancy of discovering this amazing band. For those of you that have listened to the show before, thank you so much for checking it out. I really do appreciate it. If you have taken the time to purchase any of the books in my science fiction series, and hopefully you enjoyed them, take a moment and head on over to Amazon.com and leave a review. I could really use reviews on the books that you have read, and I really do appreciate you doing so. For those of you that are new to the show and have no idea what in the hell I'm talking about, I'm a science fiction writer along with being a talk show host full-time. So if you like Depeche Mode and you read science fiction, I hope you'll check out my science fiction series. It's set in the future where air and space flight culture has replaced car culture. Inspired in part by Depeche Mode, the world we live in and life in general, life in the so-called space age, Depeche Mode does play a large part in the underlying themes of the story. And the main character himself is actually a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time when the music of the 80s through the 2000s is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story set in 2172. The stories do feature references to Depeche Mode, both direct and indirect, while telling an exciting science fiction space opera saga. Book 1's description is as follows. Taftgardia has found something, and humanity won't survive without it. With interstellar travel possible, ship mechanic Taftgardia prepared to one day travel the galaxy. But when an industrial accident inside a D-Corp, civilian and military spacecraft factory, sets off an apocalyptic chain of events, exploring the stars becomes a matter of survival. As the global evacuation begins, the ruthless Sin Argum of D-Corp threatens to destroy every vessel not loyal to his regime. Meanwhile, fellow pilot Keith Amaro suddenly receives a cryptic message from her father, an aerospace engineer who died 1 year earlier. When Taft and Keitha discover what may be the key to saving Earth's evacuees, they become unwittingly tied to the catastrophe and must solve the mystery of her father's past before it's too late. If you want to support My Nerd World and Depeche Mode, the podcast, don't miss this fast-paced and action-packed epic space opera adventure. If you like your science fiction filled with a lot of action, cool technology, some romance, EMBARK is perfect for you. Now, it's written for adults, but it's great for ages 11 plus. When the first book came out in 2018, Kyle, who's 17 now, was quite a bit younger, and I know his buddies had enjoyed reading them. He's read the entire series. Think Star Wars in terms of content. No language or any adult themes. Again, written for adults, but it is great for ages 11 plus. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today, available in ebook if you're on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited for free, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook, narrated and produced by me. It's all available on Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net will link you to Amazon.com where you can search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. For everybody listening, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. And I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to